Eve of what would have been Jordan Davis's 19th birthday, a Florida jury found his killer guilty of 3 counts of second-degree attempted murder, but deadlocked on whether Michael Dunn murdered the 17-year-old. The trial raised disturbing questions about Florida's self-defense laws and race. Ronald Davis is Jordan Davis's father, and John Phillips is the family's attorney, and they join us here in our Rise America studios. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
First of all, I just want to give you our condolences and our sympathy for the loss of your son. It's a tragic, tragic loss. And I thank you for coming to tell some of your story. Thank you also, John.
My pleasure.
You know, so often, Ron, when a person dies at the hand of violence, then that human being becomes defined by that violence. I want to take a second right off the top and have you tell us about who Jordan Davis was.
Jordan was a kid that touched snow for the first time when he was little and thought it was ice cream until it got cold. And then he learned. And Jordan was the kid that played baseball, Pony League, and was a pitcher and had all the attention on the pitcher and knew that that was the place to be, but had to learn to play left field when there was not a lot of attention. Jordan was a kid that loved to swim and to beat me swimming, and he was a better swimmer than I. Jordan was a kid that went to the beach with his dad and turned his back to the waves and see who could stand up under the pressure of getting hit with the waves in Jacksonville Beach. You know, that was Jordan Davis. Jordan was a leader of his friends. You know, when his friends decided what to do, they asked Jordan, what mall should we go to? What basketball court should we go to? What playground should we go to?
And what kind of teenager was he?
Teenager, he was, he would take things like what happened with Trayvon Martin and own it. You know, he would say, you know, he looks like me, Dad. He looks like me. Why did they shoot him like that? You know, and he would own that, and he put on a brown hoodie, you know, and say, see, Dad, he looks like me. That could have been me. And it's just a tragic thought, you know, that it was him.
Tragic irony that now they are really connected.
Yes, they are.
In that sense. What do you miss most about him, Ron?
I miss, he was my partner. Whenever I looked at a show that I thought was good, he would sit by my side and look at the show with me. You know, our favorite show at the time was 24. You know, that was our favorite show. And I missed when we looked at ball games together. He became a Yankee fan because that was my team, you know. And, you know, when we played PlayStation together, he would never want to get a game that was for one person. He wouldn't get it unless it was co-op for at least two people, because he wanted Dad to play. He would never want to even play a game unless Dad could play with him.
Wow.
He always wanted to beat me at the game. And always wanted to be taller than me. You know, he was 5'11", couldn't wait to be 6'2".
What son?
Yeah.
What son doesn't want to, outpace their dad? I want you to take me back to the trial, if you don't mind. I know you sat in there, you listened to the presentation of the evidence, the case that the prosecutor put on, the case that the defense put on. As you were sitting through that trial, did you imagine that the jury would come back with this verdict?
I thought that there was a possibility, and the reason why I say that is because of I knew what the jury instruction was going to be for self-defense, and I knew it included a stand your ground instruction. Even though he didn't claim stand your ground or file stand your ground, I knew the laws in Florida, self-defense, they do read a stand your ground instruction. And that stand your ground instruction has always confounded, you know, the juries. You know, they look at the facts and their heart tells them it's guilty because of the facts of a case. But then once you get that jury instruction from the judge, you figure, you know, this is the judge telling us this. So now you put more credence in what the judge is telling you to read, which was a 41-page instruction. You know, 41 pages. And within these hours, you're supposed to read these instructions and know these instructions as if you're a lawyer. And these are lay people. You know, they don't understand. So now you're putting your common sense aside and you're putting the facts aside and you're looking at the jury instruction.
Such an interesting analysis of how this all went down. John, let me ask you a question. As you watched the performance of Angela Corey and her team, the prosecutor, what's your assessment of how they presented this case? And did you have the same foreboding about the stand your ground law as a part of the judge's instructions?
I did. You know, I think Angela Corey's team did a good job. I think they learned from some of the lessons of Trayvon Martin's case or George Zimmerman's case. And, you know, they presented the case well, and their position was right is right and wrong is wrong, and this was wrong, and there will be a conviction here. And what they didn't realize is that stand your ground, the taking the duty of retreat away, the taking of social responsibility away that Florida law has done, does rebalance the scales a little bit. And when you have a white businessman on one side and an African-American boy on the other side, the scales were already a little tipped, weren't they? You know, the benefit of the doubt goes with the white businessman in most Americans, mindset. And whereas the white Americans thinks it's okay to lock the door if a young man looking like Jordan walks by. And so they don't get the benefit of the doubt. And so you've got the scales already a little tipped, and then you have to purify the evidence so that we don't, put in too much prejudicial stuff on Dunn's behalf or too much favorable stuff on Jordan's. And it created this situation where we could have a hung jury.
Ron, I want you to respond. As I understand it from you, 2 jurors have now spoken that sat on this case of Michael Dunn. And one of them, juror number 8, Krishuna Miles, said that this was never about race. I want to play a little bit of her interview and get your reaction. This is Krishuna Miles, juror number 8.
I never once thought about, oh, this was a black kid, this was a white guy. Because that wasn't the case.
So the people who say, here's another white guy who got away with shooting and killing a black kid, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that they really should acknowledge themselves on the law.
If this case wasn't about race, then what was it about for you?
It was about justice.
Justice.
When I walked into it, I just wanted to bring justice to whoever it was. If it was Michael Dunn, I wanted to bring justice to him. If it was Leland, Tevin, Tommy, or Jordan, I wanted to bring justice to them.
How do you react to that?
I think she's operating under a delusion, because the first thing you can look at is that you have a jury of 12 and you have 2 African Americans on the jury. That's the first thing you're looking at. The second thing you're looking at is that when Michael Dunn drove to the gas station, within seconds, he said, "I hate that thug music." That's the indication. You haven't even looked in the car to see if there was African Americans in the car or not. You said you hate that thug music, so that's an indictment against Michael Dunn. Michael Dunn did everything he could, to kill these kids without even having a conversation to know who these kids were. He just started shooting. And for her to say, after all the testimony, that Michael Dunn, number one, is an okay guy or whatever, but you still voted for second-degree murder.
And I want to jump in, and speaking of that, tell me how you feel. I mean, potentially, if his team does not appeal, and they probably will, Michael Dunn could go away for many decades, 60 to 75 years, for the conviction on these 3 second-degree attempted murders. Is that enough for you?
No, it's not. Because you know what? The world has to know that my son, Jordan Davis, his life means more than that. His life means that the person that killed Jordan Davis has to be found guilty by a court of law in the United States of America.
Michael Dunn wasn't an attempted murderer, he was a murderer. And we want that brand on him.
Yes.
I think I want to end with this, Ron, and ask you, I can only imagine the cycle of emotions that you've gone through since this whole ordeal started, from heartbreak to grief to disbelief. What's the primary emotion that remains?
The primary emotion is that when I sleep at night, I think about something that I didn't know until the trial, which was the bullet, how it traveled through my son's body. Is that it tore through his lungs, his aorta, and he was choking on his own blood. And he had time in the last seconds of his life to know that he was dying. And all of the emotions in me, just how did my son feel in the last seconds of his life, choking on his own blood at the hands of this murderer? And that's what my emotion just really builds up in me.
And you still want justice?
I want justice for Jordan. I want everybody out there to know that he wasn't just some animal, as this guy says in his letters, that black people, African Americans, are not animals and something that you can just discard, that we are part of the American existence, and he doesn't seem to realize that as yet, but he will in due time.
Ron Davis, John Phillips, thank you both, gentlemen. And again, our condolences to you.
Thank you.
We wish you the
very
best.
much. My pleasure.
And you're watching Arise America.